Welcome on into the First Round Fantasy Podcast. Your round advice. I am Gabriel Miramontes.
Whoa, there we go.
We get the technical difficulties every now and then. It is what it is. But I'm joined by Jacob Bartley. Jacob Bartley, how we doing, man?
What is up, man? No, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing some rearranging here, so I'm trying to figure out my background. So my lighting's a little off today, but it's okay. I'm ready to talk some football.
All of us are at First Round Fantasy are doing some rearranging. Clearly, my background is different. Both Justin and Joe Morsaz, the Gruesome Twosome, they're out today. They're rearranging their offices as well. We just want to bring you the best looking podcast, which podcasts are things that you listen to, but we want to give you the best visual podcast that you get anywhere that you listen to. We're making ourselves look better. All right. Anyways, today we're talking about rookie pass catchers. We have quite a few of them to go over today. We're going to touch on each of them just a bit. Before we do so, we're going to touch on a little bit of news. First up, Bears signed Marquise Goodwin. Obviously, he sat out 2020 due to COVID-19 concerns. Jacob, how relevant is Marquise Goodwin to this new look Chicago offense with Andy Dalton at the helm?
I almost didn't want to include this because it's not too big of news, but I think it's relevant enough. If you remember, this was such a weird situation. If you remember, the Eagles either traded for or signed, I think they traded for Marquise Goodwin last year. And then he sat out of the 2020 season. But there was a clause in the agreement that, like, if he didn't play, he goes back to San Francisco. I've never seen that before. And that actually happened. But then now the Bears are signing him. So this is it's good for the Bears, but I don't think him or anybody else is going to emerge. I mean, I'm rooting for Darnell Mooney, but I don't see anybody else emerging other than Allen Robinson. So it's kind of irrelevant.
I mean, when you do think about it from one aspect, it does help Allen Robinson just a tad, given that Marquise Goodwin has been known, when healthy, to certainly stretch the field, take a little bit of attention off of Allen Robinson. So any way, shape, or form you throw that guy in there, it's another guy that they have to focus on as a deep field threat, and I think that's a plus for Allen Robinson. There was another piece of news. I just wanted to touch on it because you are a 49ers fan. Niners signed running back backup, but also kind of like just played a lot the last 2 years because Saquon Barkley's been injured. Wayne Gallman. Recently, we've heard murmurs and rumors about the all-star potential of Raheem Mostert, and we've seen it with our own eyes. Unfortunately, injuries have derailed that for a little bit. Right now, they don't really have anyone. Tevin Coleman shipped off to New York, so they have Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Hasty, right?
Yep.
Gallman fit into that picture? He get carries like week 1, week 2? Is he enough to be a nuisance?
Yes, because throughout the year, I think the Niners use the most running backs throughout the year. They use like 4 or 5 guys, and not because they want to, because of injuries, right?
Yeah.
And also because he likes to mix it up, Shanahan. He's the one guy who, if you're a four-string running back of the Niners, you might get some play any week. You never know. And randomly, if you remember, Jerick McKinnon would just be out 1 week, and he wouldn't even play. And so – I've been saying all offseason that the Niners are going to add a running back. I think right now all right, so you have, I don't even know if Hasty's on the roster, but still, we could see him there. You have 2 or 3 guys. I still think they might draft one, but now this is making me think maybe not. But he will be a factor, not enough to be fantasy relevant. Like, I would just roster Mostert, and you don't know who the handcuff is. Like, you're not going to know.
Yeah, you'll probably never know. But with Raheem Mostert's injury and with how well San Francisco runs the ball, I mean, any given Sunday, you could be picking this guy up off the waiver wire because he's going to be very much fantasy relevant.
And that's the thing. So we saw Gallman last year. He was very fantasy relevant. He was actually a solid player. And if Mostert goes down, which he's prone to do, Gallman could be that guy. And we haven't seen him, he's always the healthy guy behind the guy who gets hurt. So, maybe he is the right handcuff to have, because we see Jeff Wilson get hurt. JaMycal Hasty couldn't pull it together. So maybe there is something to that for him to be the handcuff for Mostert.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put any bad juju on Wayne Gallman, but he was the backup to Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley had a lot of injuries the last 2 years. He goes over to San Francisco, where they've been dealing with a lot of injuries the last 2 years. So maybe, just maybe, Wayne Gallman finds himself relevant early on in 2021. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and move on now to look at these rookie wide receiver classes. First off, let's take a look at some of the teams in the NFL that probably need to address the wide receiver, teams that are certainly lacking in that department. From my eye and point of view, I can see that the Cardinals need some wide receiver help. I know that they have A.J. Green, DeAndre Hopkins, but really Christian Kirk hasn't panned out as that third cemented option. The Colts, Dolphins, Bengals, Eagles, Jaguars, Lions, of course. Maybe even the New England Patriots want to invest in some youth after N'Keal Harry didn't really pan out over the last 2 years. Ravens, Texans, Titans, just to name a few, and I'm sure that there'll probably be other wide receivers that are drafted anywhere else on draft day. But with that being said, we kind of have the field. We're going to look at some of these top prospects. And the first one being Ja'Marr Chase. All right. He is a beastly man, 6 feet, 207 pounds, LSU. Now, he opted out of the 2020 season. He did not play. That wasn't a factor in making him pretty much the unquestionable number one pick among rookie wide receivers this year. Just like we've done with the quarterbacks and the rookie running backs over the last 2 weeks, we've looked at the most recent NFL and CBS mock drafts to see where they just have these guys landing. Currently, Cincinnati with the 5th pick is suspected. And that was at 8 o'clock this morning. The NFL has him going to Cincinnati with the 5th pick. CBS has him going just a pick later to Miami at number 6. Now, Jacob, Cincy or Miami, which one, just off the bat, even if this isn't your preferred option, which one would be the better fit?
Ooh, that is tough. If we're talking about just where is he going to thrive the most fantasy-wise and where is he going to put up the biggest numbers, I would say Cincinnati. I mean, I know he played with Joe Burrow, so obviously there's a connection there. Mm-hmm. And all the highlights I watched were with Joe Burrow because Ja'Marr Chase sat out in 2020. So the last time he played was with Joe Burrow, and exactly. They both made it look. I don't know if you watched some of their highlights, but they both make it look so easy. Like Joe Burrow's just like whoop, just like pops it to him, and it's so easy. Not going to be as easy in the NFL, but I could totally see that. That's not where I have him going. I don't have him going to either, but out of those two, Cincinnati.
Well, then that's a perfect segue. Where do you have Ja'Marr Chase going?
So I'm not a mock draft expert, but I'm just looking at where everybody's drafting, right? And it's hard for us. Like, I don't want to like say, oh, this team's going to trade up to the number 6 spot to get Ja'Marr Chase. I don't want to talk about hypotheticals because anything like that can happen, right?
Literally anything, yeah.
But if everything goes as is right now, I see the Detroit Lions taking him.
I believe they have the 12th pick, right?
They have the 7th pick.
Oh, actually. My goodness. There
Detroit
you go.
Lions at number 7. And that means I have Miami passing on him, but I'll tell you why. And Cincinnati's going to get offensive linemen. So probably Penei Sewell. So that's why I think – and then Miami's going to take somebody else. And then I have Detroit taking Ja'Marr Chase. Detroit needs a lot of pieces, right? They need defense. They need everything except a few key positions.
Yeah.
So, and of course, maybe Kyle Pitts can fall to them. And even though, like, you can have Hawkinson and Pitts, but I just think you want to get in there and get a dominant wide receiver. You need a dominant skill player. You want to entertain your fans, put butts in the seats, have something for the NFL to talk about when it comes to the Lions. What better than getting the best wide receiver coming out of this class? You know how many highlight plays this guy's going to have, even in Detroit, and they're going to be in shootouts. And this needs to stop the disrespect for Jared Goff. He is not some bum quarterback. He's a very talented quarterback. I'm not saying he even sniffs the top 10, not at all, but he gets so much hate ever since traded to Detroit, and he can deliver the ball to a guy like Jamar Chase. So because of the targets he's going to get, and because I think it makes sense for the Lions, I have Chase going to the Lions, and he'd be a beast there, target monster.
Most definitely, especially being really one of the only options that Goff has. So that's a great point to mention. I'm going to refer back. I know that you mentioned the massive O lineman, one of the top prospects for offensive tackles going to Cincinnati. I forget his name, and the name escapes me. What was his name again?
Penei Sewell?
Penei Sewell, right?
Yes.
So when I looked at it and I saw the mock draft, immediately between the two options, I thought, yeah, I think Cincinnati is the better option, but they are lacking. So it brought the question to mind, would I rather have Joe Burrow throwing to Jamar Chase with an awful line, right, that isn't going to be really improved if they don't invest that draft capital on somebody like who you just mentioned? Or do they pay up, get the offensive tackle, and then they pick up another wide receiver a little bit later in the draft? I do think that T. Higgins has breakout potential this year. I'm excited to see what he can do. I also think Tyler Boyd has really cemented himself somewhere between that 20 to 25 range, even way closer than that at times. But I just think that they have a connection. You brought it up. They have a past. I love Cincinnati for this reason. I don't think they get it done, but that's where I'd like to see them. And unfortunately, Jacob, I don't know if he falls to number 7 at Detroit, because I think if Cincinnati passes on him, I think Miami definitely picks him up with the number 6 pick. But we'll have to wait.
We'll see.
All right, so let's move on. Listen, tight end, whatever you may call it, this dude's not a tight end. Kyle Pitts, tight end, questionable mark, right? From Florida, 6'6", 240. Every single video that I have seen from this guy, he is catching a pass 20 yards downfield. That is not something that you see tight ends do very often.
And it's always on the outside, too.
Always on the outside.
It's rarely
right?
in the middle.
He never starts on the edge. He always starts like he's running in the slot. And
but
then
to be fair,
20
we're only
downfield.
watching the highlights. He might line up in the middle, but that's not where his best plays are. So
Yeah, most definitely. With that being said, I mean, he is a talent not to be taking lightly in this draft. He will be going soon. I don't see him making it out of the top 8. With that being said, Atlanta, according to CBS, is picking him with the number 4 overall pick. A couple of weeks ago, we had thought that Atlanta might go running back in this situation, but who knows? With an aging Julio Jones and a rising star in Calvin Ridley, that pairing might be nice. NFL has him going at number 7 to the Arizona Cardinals, which I think is a much more appetizing option.
So obviously that would be a trade.
Kyle Pitts. Yes, it would be a trade. So I just think that this guy towers over defenders. He catches a lot of balls that are up in the air, a lot of balls that are 20 yards downfield. I mean, he's a wide receiver in a tight end body, right? He's like a power forward, basically. I love Arizona for that reason. They don't really have a cemented tight end. I think their last one that was even relevant, and he wasn't even relevant, he was just number 1 on the depth chart, was Rodney Seale-Jones. He didn't do much of anything last year. They bring in A.J. Green to help alongside DeAndre Hopkins. But I think there's a big gaping hole there. And who can fill a big gaping hole? A big dude, right? Like Kyle Pitts. I just think it's really good. I think he can fit into this offense, and I think Kyler Murray can get him going right out of the gates. What are your thoughts, Jake?
So, like I said, and you're using a mock draft where they place him making a trade. That's fair. I didn't consider trades, but the thought of him on the Cardinals scares the hell out of me for multiple reasons, because there's not really a secondary target there who's going to consume all these targets.
Exactly.
Right? So if they do get him somehow, he's going to be a target monster, because he could go to somewhere like Cincinnati, Dallas, where he's not going to get as many targets as he would if he goes to Arizona.
Yeah.
But being that I said I'm going to just go with the board of how it is now, I have the Miami Dolphins taking him with the 6th pick, and that is why I have Ja'Marr Chase falling to number 7. And they could go either way. I think if Miami doesn't take him, Detroit could take him. So, but I'm going with what I chose, which is Miami. And here's my thinking. At first, I used to think like, okay, Detroit or Miami can't take him. He's a tight end. They have a tight end. But I'm like, that's not – you can't think like that. It's a league where, first of all, you can play 2 tight end sets. Look at the Patriots, who they just signed this offseason, and what they've done in the past. You can play both of them. Injuries happen.
Baltimore Ravens, they've done it the last 2 years.
Gesicki lines up in the slot sometimes, like as a receiver. He's very receiver-esque type tight end as well. So you can line them both up. And the thing for me is, yes, Ja'Marr Chase would get open a lot and provide a lot of, things for Tua. But Kyle Pitts is so big. Like, I think Tua needs a Kyle Pitts. Because Burrow doesn't need a Kyle Pitts to put up numbers for him to look good to get the offense moving.
No.
Tua might need a Kyle Pitts in order to do that. So what I'm guessing is I think because a lot of people are saying that Pitts is the most talented, other than Trevor Lawrence, that Pitts is the most talented player in this draft. So if you think that he's a generational player like that, look, Chase is great, but is he this huge, like the Calvin Johnson of tight ends? Probably not. Or he's a wide receiver, but you know what I mean? So I think that it's going to go, Pitts to Miami and then Chase to the Lions. And simply because, look, it just makes too much sense. He went to Florida. He's just going to go to Miami. And I could just see it. The Dolphins are a really good team. That would put them over the top, in my opinion.
Yeah, it would make them a force to be reckoned with. And more importantly, what you said, it gives Tua another option. Really a second year where a lot of fantasy experts, including myself, I don't consider myself a fantasy expert just yet, but I like to think I had the confidence to do so. They don't really have they don't really have Tua as a fantasy option this year. He's a streamer at best, week in and week out, but the more weapons you give him, the more tantalizing that option becomes. I like it. So I definitely hope it happens. Referencing back to Arizona, I would love to see that happen via trade. Obviously, it gets a little crazy.
And I was going to say, I didn't finish earlier, because they're in the Niners with the division with the Niners, I would just hate that if you went to Arizona.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's likely not to happen. So, hey, guess what? You probably won't see it. But I think that's it for Kyle Pitts, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know last week I mentioned that no matter where he goes, he's going to succeed, and you tend to disagree with that. Do you still feel that way?
I have long been with the notion that it takes tight ends quite a bit of time to develop in terms of fantasy potential, right? TJ Hawkinson showed flashes very, very rarely in his rookie season. Last year, he showed up a little bit more.
Week 1, remember, he had a big game and then did nothing the rest of the year.
Did nothing the rest of the season. But sophomore season, he came back. He's a little bit more. And now he's being looked at as a top 5 option. You can say the same thing for quite a few other guys. I don't think Kyle Pitts fits the tight end mold of what we've seen in the past. I think he's different. I think if you were to compare him to anybody like this, you compare him to someone like Jordan Reed, who, yes, we know him as a often injured type of guy. But coming into the NFL, Jordan Reed was something different. He was something of a freak of nature at his position. And I think Kyle Pitts is above that on many different ways. And I think he can succeed right away in the NFL. So, yes, maybe I've backed off.
Hey, I'm not going to lie to you. That is the best comparison I've heard yet. Because Kyle Pitts is hard to compare players to, right? And if you look at Jordan Reed, tall dude, 6'2", long, lengthy, if he stayed healthy, he would have been just a juggernaut at the position. So that's the best comparison I've heard yet. And I told you I listened to like 4 or 5 football podcasts today. So good job, man.
Shout outs to Jordan Reed on his retirement, by the way. With that being said, we are moving on to the Heisman Trophy winner in 2020, DeVonta Smith, wide receiver from Alabama. He was the first wide receiver to win the Heisman since 1991. Listen, the biggest knock that I've heard about DeVonta Smith coming out of the draft or going into the draft is his weight. He comes in at 6 feet, 170, 174, something like that. And I frankly just had enough of it. I don't really care. This guy's been playing football while also probably trying to pass a Spanish test the last 2 or 3 years. Like, people forget that these college players, although on a national stage, they have other things that they have to get done. It's called college, right? People think that they have this easy route to just go right to the NFL. They have to do things too. Don't get me wrong. When he gets into the NFL, there are people that are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to get the most out of these guys. You can best believe that someone like DeVonta Smith is going to pack on the poundage once he gets into the NFL. And even if he doesn't, I still think that's okay. He might take some hits. He might, it might be a little scary sometimes, but he's shown toughness in college. Obviously, the competition gets tougher in the NFL. I don't think it's a worry, though. I think it's something that we'll just have to wait and see. And for all of you doubters out there, you're going to be sorry because it's probably going to be pretty good. With that being said, Detroit, via trade, has him with the 16th pick, according to the NFL mock draft this morning. I really like him with the number 11 pick to the New York Giants. I know, right? They signed Kenny Golladay. They have Evan Ingram. They have Sterling Shepard. They have options there, right? They got Kyle Rudolph. DeVonta Smith puts that offense over the top. And when you look at an organization like the New York Giants, they are literally giving Daniel Jones every opportunity to say, this is your chance. We have surrounded you with the utmost of opportunity to succeed. If you can't, you're done. Adding DeVonta Smith is just like the cherry on the cake there. I love it. I think it's a great fit. He's a very precise route runner. Kenny Golladay, we talk about this time and time again. We always have conversations about Kenny Golladay on the podcast and how, the volume's never really been there. He's been kind of that deep pass catch guy. He's also been kind of injured throughout the last couple of years. DeVonta Smith comes in. He's able to create space in just extraordinary ways. He's a very precise route runner. And I just think that's another weapon that New York could use at their disposal at the wide receiver position. So my pick would be the New York Giants. But there's two sides to this coin. Jacob, how do you feel?
Yeah, man. All anybody's talking about is how the weight of DeVonta Smith and how skinny he is and all this stuff. And I'm like, I understand where they're coming from because, like, even a Deshaun Jackson, right, who was similar type player, he's been injured a lot, all his career. And then even like a Marquise Hollywood Brown, very similar type player, right? He hasn't been able to explode on the scene yet. He's had some great games, some explosive plays, but can somebody be like that style of player and just be consistent week in and week out? And I think they can. That he's been able to get this far. Who would have thought this 174-pound guy would win the Heisman, first wide receiver since 91, like you said. So he's already overcoming the odds. And I don't care what people say. He's going to get to NFL. They're going to do what they got to do to take care of his body. So I'm not worried about that. I like your pick with the Giants. That's where a lot of people have him going there. And I guess a lot of my picks are like kind of selfish fantasy player because I'm like, I don't want him to go to New York because it's going to take away targets from other people. It's going to take away targets from him. So I just want to move a little bit tiny more down on the draft board to the Philadelphia Eagles at the number 12 pick. Look, so here's the thing, though. A lot of people, and we're going to talk about this guy next, Jalen Waddle. Some people have Waddle over him on draft boards. Mm-hmm. And I guess at that point, who do you like, right? So we could see a situation where Smith goes to the Giants, Waddle goes to the Eagles. The Eagles need to do something, though. And that's what I'm saying. The Eagles need a playmaker. Jalen Reagor is decent. He needs to, like, Jalen Reagor would thrive with a Joe Burrow throwing to him, maybe not a Jalen Hurts. So I don't know how Reagor's going to work out, but I can just already see. Look, Deshaun Jackson, he was a phenomenon in Philadelphia his rookie year. Let's bring that back to Philadelphia with Smith, and I could totally see I could already see him in the Eagles uniform just booking it down the field. And so I like it. I'm going to go with the Eagles.
Deshaun Jackson, right? That speed, that burst, that breakaway game breaking.
Yes, Deshaun Jackson. Yeah.
Obviously, I think he's a much more gifted athlete. Of course, I mean, who am I to speak, right? Deshaun Jackson is gifted as well, but DeVonta Smith a little bit more touted coming out of the draft. But no, I love Philadelphia, which is why we're going to talk about Waddle next and why I think Waddle might be a better option. Yeah, I seem to be going with the flow. I get it.
Well, no, it makes sense.
Options make sense, right?
That's the thing. That's the reason why they're there. They make sense. And I just tried to switch it up. Like, what if that doesn't happen? What else could happen, you know?
Yeah, of course. And I think both Waddle, who we'll talk about, I mean, pretty much in just a moment, but both Waddle and Smith are just really good in the open space. And that kind of just brings us to Waddle. I guess we can just move on. For those of you who do not know, he's our next guy. Jalen Waddle, Alabama wide receiver, 5'10", 183.
Both played at Alabama.
Despite only playing in 6 games in 2020, he had 28 receptions for 591 yards. He had 33 receptions in 2019 and had 560 yards. So it just goes to show, I mean, he caught 5 less passes in 2020 in 6 games, and he was able to put up more yardage. And a lot of his highlights are what he can do with space, whether that be a screen pass, whether that be a catch out of the backfield, in the slot, breakaway, whatever it is. I think that's a better option for someone like the Philadelphia Eagles who have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts. You know, Jalen Hurts is obviously getting the comp in year 1 to the likes of Lamar Jackson, a guy who's not terribly accurate, but he's very usable for fantasy because he runs well. And he makes his team a little bit better because those quarterbacks that are versatile, it doesn't matter if you're not that accurate because you're going to make up for it on the ground. With that being said, I can see a lot of those types of plays coming from a Philadelphia Eagles offense running through Jalen Hurts, which is why I like Waddle, because a lot of his highlights, again, are screen passes, out of the backfield, slant routes, and then he just kind of does what he do. He catches these 5-10-yard passes, and he makes things happen. I feel like that's more likely to happen in a situation like Philadelphia, whether if he was supposed to go to somewhere like New York, where I have DeVonta Smith going. Somewhere like DeVonta Smith in New York, they need that guy who can be technical, who can run the routes, who can get the job done. That's not the situation in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, it's like this play is going to go all over the place, and when it breaks down, we need Jalen Waddle to get the ball and do something with it. And that's how it's going to happen most of the time, which is why I like Jalen Waddle in that scenario. So that's my pick for Jalen Waddle. Yes, I'm going with the flow, the Philadelphia Eagles. Sir, Jacob, are you reinforcing your pick of where Jalen Waddle should go?
So, like I said before, I'm just going to move a little bit down the board. And this is kind of playing – this is where I kind of am just hoping for this because it would be exciting as opposed to like it's probably not going to happen because they have other needs and they have enough offensive players, which is the Los Angeles Chargers getting him at the 113. I believe they have the 13th pick overall in the NFL draft. And I understand that, okay, look, they have Keenan Allen and they have Mike Williams, but other than Keenan Allen, nobody's been able to figure it out consistently there.
No,
Mike Williams has his role. He just needs to stay healthy. But you add, can you imagine? So Jalen Waddle gets a lot of comps to Tyreek Hill, right? And a lot of people are saying like people try to compare people to Tyreek Hill, but this is like the closest thing to it, according to the experts, I guess. But I just can you imagine a Tyreek Hill type player with Justin Herbert? And
insane.
I just can't imagine. I guarantee you. Let's just say it happens like this. Even Chase goes to the Lions. I mean he'll be drafted high because he's going to get a lot of targets and he's the best guy. But then everything works out how we said it, and then the Chargers get Jalen Waddle. People are going to be drooling over Jalen Waddle because you have Justin Herbert throwing to him, and everyone's so excited about that offense. And Keenan Allen, he's still dominant wide receiver 1, but in a year now, he's just not going to be that guy anymore. and they don't have their replacement yet to be the best wide receiver. I love Mike Williams more than anybody. Ask Joe. I've been just hoping, I draft Mike Williams like every year, and I just hope that he pulls it together. I've accepted it that he's not going to take that next step and, be an alpha dog, but I can see a Jalen Waddle going there, eventually taking over for Keenan Allen as the best wide receiver on the Chargers.
Yeah, no, most definitely. That's a really good option. It literally explodes the West. I mean,
oh my goodness.
The Raiders drafted Henry Ruggs last year in that Tyreek-like role, right? Obviously, it's not panning out in year one. We'll see how
I hope he picks it up this year, yeah.
But it seems like everybody in the West is looking for that player, like that Tyreek Hill type of guy. So, yeah, if Waddle lands
you got to keep up. If they can score in like 10 seconds, you got to be able to too.
100%, man. And if, like you said, dude, if a team like the Chargers drafts a guy like Waddle, I am taking him in most drafts, knowing that he's going to get a lot of volume as a wide receiver too, coming into the season. So I love that pick. I think it's a great one.
Yeah.
I think that's it for Jalen Waddle. We're moving on now. Let's talk a little bit about these next few guys. Obviously, they're not the big names that you're going to see on draft day, but you might see this one. Rashad Bateman, wide receiver from Minnesota, 6'2", 209. He was the Big Ten wide receiver of the year, which is a feat within itself. To be quite honest with you, this is going to sound kind of weird, but he does all the things that a Devontae Smith guy does, right? He's a very good route runner from what I've seen, and he just kind of does everything really well. Does he do it great? Who knows? Obviously at the college level he did, but we'll see how that translates to the NFL. Currently, the NFL doesn't have him predicted going in the first 2 rounds. Chicago, according to CBS, is picking him with the 20th pick overall, which I've seen Chicago all over the place with QBs, with running backs, wide receivers. It's literally any man's game there in Chicago. But with that being said, I think that this guy finds a nice fit, whether it be Chicago to help out someone like Allen Robinson, whether it's later in the draft where a team like the Green Bay Packers, who are picking a little bit later in the first round or maybe even the second or third round, they can find someone like a Rashad Bateman, that guy to pair across Devontae Adams. I think that he will be very serviceable if he can find himself in a very comfortable number 2 role, sitting aside one of the NFL's best wide receivers, given a Devontae Adams or maybe even a Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. Who knows? But the jury's out on him. Do you have any thoughts on Rashad Bateman?
Well, first of all, don't step on my boy's toes, Gabriel Davis. That's Gabriel Davis's role. He's going to blow up this year. I've been telling you guys about him since last year.
Yeah.
So don't – and he has a good first name, right?
I'm rooting for you.
But I think – so this is the one where I am sticking to the book and going with the Bears. I think it makes too much sense. Look, if you notice, I'm picking teams that have a strong need at wide receiver. Obviously, the Lions, the Eagles, the Bears. Because, again, who has emerged even before, Allen Robinson got there, they couldn't figure it out since Brandon Marshall left. So I think that it's a need for them. But with this pick, I struggled because I believe the Bears, the Colts, and the Titans all pick back to back to back. And I could see any of those 3 taking him. But I would say the Bears because, look, they franchise tagged Allen Robinson. So they could let Allen Robinson walk after this season, which probably is what they're going to do. And boom. And if Rashad Bateman comes out, you compared him to Devontae Smith. He's a little bit taller. He's about 210 pounds. So I could see a guy like this becoming the next big guy in Chicago. But I also could see these other 2 teams. The Colts probably need another guy. And
I don't really like Pittman too much. I don't know if I've ever said that, but maybe I should put it on Twitter to document it.
Shame on you.
Just like you should put on Twitter that you think big things of Gabriel Davis. Document these things so we can go back and prove the world.
Oh, well, it's documented on video. Like a year ago I did. I told everybody, go pick up Gabriel Davis in Dynasty right now. Go pick him up. I told people. But yeah, man, I'm gonna go with the Bears. It makes too much sense for them.
Yeah.
They need another playmaker there.
Yeah, most definitely. You had mentioned Mooney before, but verdict's out on him. He's got the potential. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, Chicago seems like a nice landing spot. We'll see what happens on draft day. Let's move on. We're going to talk about Terrence Marshall Jr., wide receiver from LSU, played alongside Jamar Chase. Interesting. Oh, wait, did I forget someone? Yes,
no,
I did
see,
forget someone.
now there's a button. So there's a couple more guys here.
Yeah, so let's talk about Rondale Moore. Sorry about that. For those of you who are watching the shortened clips, you won't know any different. Rondale Moore, wide receiver out of Purdue, 5'9", 181. Currently, according to the NFL, going with the 23rd pick to the New York Jets. I don't know if I like it too much. We'll see. I do like Rondale Moore very much so. Believe it or not, his biggest season, his most productive season in college football was in 2018, where he played a full season. Other than that, over the last 2 seasons, he's only played in 7 games. So despite that, his short history, he's still one of the top 5 or 6 prospects in this year's draft. So he was able to create quite a pedigree for himself in 2018. I think that he's very capable of getting himself open in space, which is what we can say about a lot of these guys. With that being said, yeah, I could see him going to a place like New York. Obviously, they're picking up Zach Wilson pretty much undoubtedly, and it'd be nice to just add another weapon to that field. Denzel Mills showed promise last year as a touted young rookie. Other than that, Jamison Crowder, we'll see. He's good. He's actually really serviceable for fantasy, but in the NFL, it just looks like a lot of people are like, yeah, he is what he is. But for fantasy, he's been really good, especially a PPR beast at times. But adding an option like Rondale Moore to the New York Jets could prove very, very nicely. Jacob?
Yeah, I don't know too much about Rondale Moore. He is, expected to go in the first round. There's also another Moore, Elijah Moore, who on that CBS mock draft, they have Elijah Moore going higher than Rondale Moore, which is crazy. But I don't know if the Jets are going to take a wide receiver with that 23rd overall pick. It's possible. But I could see him falling maybe to the Ravens. The Ravens
desperately need wide receiver help.
Need to address wide receiver help. They don't even have a number one. Honestly.
They tried to steal Juju away from Pittsburgh in the offseason. That didn't work out. Hollywood Brown's having a hard time panning out. Willie Snead's gone down to Oakland. Or, God, I got to stop saying that. Down to Las Vegas. So, yeah, they're in desperate need. And I'm surprised a lot of these guys really haven't fit the mold yet, or at least our ideas of where they could land, maybe because they're going higher up in the draft and Baltimore doesn't pick till a little bit later on. But that's a perfect fit. I love that fit for pretty much any of the last 2 guys we talked about. They could definitely fall that far. And some of these other names that we'll touch on in a bit are also suitable candidates for the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to be keeping a close eye. And maybe it's not going to end up being the best fantasy spot for them, but it's going to help Lamar Jackson, and it could help. Maybe Marquise Brown needs to be the number 2, and it opens it up for him. So, I could see any of these late first round guys going to the Ravens.
Yeah, and the more and more I think about it, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago on our running back show, how with that 23rd pick, we thought that the Jets would go running back. So it's very unlikely. We'll have to wait and see. But Rondale Moore, talented. Let's see where he ends up. Moving on, we're going to talk about Terrence Marshall Jr., who I was going to talk about previously before overstepping my lane. Another wide receiver from LSU, 6'3", 210 pounds. The guy played with both Jefferson and Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings and Jamar Chase, and still was able to find himself scoring 13 touchdowns in those seasons. So he's talented within himself. Unfortunately, he just kind of takes a back seat to some of these really, really top-notch prospects. And believe it or not, the NFL mock draft has him going at number 31 to none other than the Kansas City Chiefs. So that pick, I think with Sammy Watkins departing, taking his talents elsewhere. There's a little bit of a void there. People are calling for the Mecole Hardman breakout. I think he's more of a gadget guy. Throw in someone like Terrence Marshall Jr. to line up beside Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and watch that offense just get even better and more sickening to watch as a Las Vegas Raiders fan. I'm going to take a deep breath as I – Jacob, what about you?
Again, not too much knowledge on Terrence Marshall, but I know there was a lot of recent hype on him, but I think if you're looking at where he could go and who's picking around that spot, I like the Green Bay Packers to take him. I don't think nobody has emerged as the number 2 there. Alan Lazard looks really good.
That's a great spot.
MVS has flashed here and there, but I think, look, last year, a lot of people said they should have taken a wide receiver instead of Jordan Love. And I forget the order it went in, but can you imagine if the Packers added CeeDee Lamb or something like that instead? It would have been insane. So yes. You get him, one of these guys, even though they say that, Aaron Rodgers is kind of ignores the rookies and stuff. He can't do that. You got to bring in one of these guys, 6'2", and give Rodgers another weapon and somebody who can just make an impact right away. And that's another thing is like, we might see one of these more talented guys go to a situation where they're going to get more targets, but you could see a guy like Terrace Marshall fall to the Packers. And then it's like, wow, now, even though he was a lower rated prospect, but he's going to be a higher rated fantasy prospect going into the season because he's catching balls from Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, of course. And that's a great point to mention because it's often overlooked. You think about these guys that go with, in the first 10 picks, these wide receivers. Often the teams that have, some of these first picks, this case, it's a little unusual this year when you have San Francisco picking and other good teams there. But generally, these teams need some help. So when they draft these star potential players early on, they have to build around them. They have to continue building. And it's often a struggle early on. And it's these players like Terrence Marshall Jr., who might fall to some of these better, more established teams that find themselves very much more relevant out of the gates, or especially later on in the season when they're catching balls from guys like Tom Brady. Well, he hasn't had a rookie receiver like that, but Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, players like that. So I love that mindset. I love that point. It's a great one to bring up, Jacob. And with that being said, there are a few other names here. I'm just going to bring up two. Kadarius Toney, wide receiver from Florida. He was projected on both CBS, NFL. Then I was just curious of who he was. I looked up. He's also on Yahoo's mock drafts going in the first 2 rounds. So clearly a guy to keep an eye on. And then also my sleeper, who I am very much involved in. And I've been known to just love guys too much. And it is my crutch. Example, Kerryon Johnson. I'm still holding on to that guy. I'm still holding on hope, all right? But it may not pan out. But for this guy, Elijah Moore, who Jacob touched on earlier, in one of these drafts, they do have him going with the 21st pick to the Indianapolis Colts.
That's the highest I've seen him this so far.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I think that he's able to do the same things that Devontae Smith can do. And that just speaks greatness and great things about him. I want to see where he goes. I have potential that I have reason to believe that he could be a guy that falls to the Packers. He could be a guy that falls to maybe the Buffalo Bills, invest a little bit later in the draft. There are really good options with these 2nd and 3rd round, even 4th round picks. And if Elijah Moore falls to one of these better established teams, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But that's just my opinion, and I'll keep talking about him as we continue on. With that being said, Jacob, any of these last other guys that are kind of floating around bring any attention to your eyes or catch your eye?
I didn't know you liked Elijah Moore so much, man. That's going to have to use that for trade bait. No, just kidding.
Truth comes out.
I'll never do that to you, Gabe. There's a few guys. There's a guy named Amon-Ra St. Brown. And he has a brother who played in the league, Equanimous St. Brown, but this guy is supposed to be like their whole family's athletes, and this guy's supposed to be the best out of the whole family, like as far as actual NFL prospect. And I don't see. Did you see him on the CBS mock draft at all?
No, I did not see him on this.
Well, I think he's in the round. If he would be in the round 2 or 3. But I like him. I don't know where he could land though. But there's also, and we labeled this like pass catchers or wide receiver tight ends because we have Kyle Pitts in here. I like Pat Freiermuth. He's a tight end. So they're saying that he is a complete ready to go NFL tight end. Like if Kyle Pitts wasn't in the draft, that he would be, he wouldn't go in the first, like he might go at the end of the first round, but I'm saying he wouldn't go in the top 10 picks or anything like that. No way. Kyle Pitts is just generational talent, but this would be the guy who, if you need a tight end, this is the guy you're targeting. And a lot of mock drafts, the CBS one has him going to the Chiefs at the end of the 3rd round. I don't think that's going to happen, but I could see somewhere like the Jaguars supplying their brand new quarterback with a
team we have yet to talk
new
about.
tight end and a good tight end. So I like that. And if I don't grab a Kyle Pitts in some of my rookie drafts, I'm definitely going to have my eye on Freiermuth, depending on where he goes.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great name to bring up. You see those players a lot, players of players who have played in the NFL, and it's just crazy to think like, oh man, like those parents must just be so happy. And I'm over here with my 2 brothers and yeah, there's not a lot going on, we're just
their dad was Mr. Universe.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
See, these are just the things that, people have, and we don't. With that being said, that is going to be the conclusion of our rookie wide receiver special. We're going to break down these videos, get them out to you guys throughout the week. Be sure to be on the lookout for those if you want a short recap of each of these players that we broke down today. With that being said, we are excited to announce next Thursday. Yes, we know it's the NFL draft. Yes, we know it's a work night. Yes, we know you're probably going to be watching the draft alone. Not anymore. Come hang out with us. We're going to be watching the draft too, right along with you. Bring your cup of candy, bring a soda, bring a beer, whatever you want. Watch the draft, watch our reactions, join us in the comments. It's going to be a good time. We're going to do the first 2 rounds or so, and we're excited. It's going to be live. Join us. Have a great time. With that being said, as always, find us on Twitter at First Round Fantasy or Instagram at First Round Fantasy. Have questions for the show? FirstRoundFantasy@gmail.com. And you can always find the merch at tpublic/first-round-fantasy. Jakey, thank you so much. You look so good. With that being said, guys, we are out of here. We will see you next Thursday live when we watch the draft with you. Let's hope it's a good one. It should be, right? Peace.